Moving right along to our last panel, and then we have our rewards award show, and then of course networking cocktail hour. So I believe we can all agree that mental health is a topic of paramount importance. Yet for men, it often remains unspoken. This is going to be a really interesting panel. Societal norms and stigmas can prevent open conversations, leading to hidden struggles that need to be brought to light. Today, we're breaking the silence and setting the stage for a transformative talk. Our next panel brings together voices from various walks of life to unravel the complexities of mental health among men. Let's welcome our session's moderator, Anthony J. Nelson, founder and managing partner at Growth Culture, and our esteemed panelists. They are going to shed light on this crucial topic. Let's talk about mental health and men and encourage some open dialogues for well-being. Round of applause.
Thank you. Okay. At the end of the day, does anybody have any energy left?
No,
I'm sure.
No.
no.
I see two people in the crowd that may boo me once or twice. Craig, Brandon. Um, Thrilled to be here. I know it's the end of the day. I know it's generally when people run out of energy. We had all of our carbs at lunch and run out of, wanting to stay through these panels. But I'm pretty excited about this one because I think of in business, in healthcare, everything that we do, diversity of thought is very, very important. Whether it's men's mental health, women's mental health, or anything in between, the panel that we have here is quite inspiring, I think, because we have some business minds, we have some clinicians, we have some investors, and the like. So we're excited to be here. I'm Anthony, founded Growth Culture, really on the foundation of after spending a ton of time in healthcare SaaS companies, saw an opportunity to come out and actually figure out how to help other healthcare entities scale earlier on. Because when these companies are doing really, really well, that means we're expanding access to care, we're improving the well-being of providers. Even though payers aren't always the people that we like to talk about, we do need them to be doing things as well too. So my whole goal is to make sure that we have a very good ecosystem of solutions like Craig's out in the market, to make sure that we're supporting people. So I'll turn it over to the rest of the crew because we have some really dynamic backgrounds here, and I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, and then we'll get into it.
Sure. So my name is Cassandra Ruella. I'm a licensed professional counselor by trade, and I'm the executive director of Paramount Wellness Retreat, which is a detox and rehabilitation center for substance use. But my background previous to that was about 10 years parallel to the Department of Corrections, which is very heightened in male clients. So that's why this was very important to me.
Hi all, my name is Gaurav Bhandari. I work with Leon Capital Partners. We invest and operate in healthcare companies with a very strong focus on access and quality of care. Um, One of our operating companies is in mental health space. It's called Turnwell Mental Health Network. We have around 80 professionals, 80 providers there on our platform working in 8 states. Um, and yeah, I'm so very happy to be here with everyone and have a good discussion here with about accessibility and the quality of service to the patients right now.
Hi, my name is Ronita Boat, and I'm an entrepreneur, patient advocate, certified peer counselor, published author, and I'm also the founder and executive director of Caring with Compassion Community, which is a peer-run organization where we support those with lived experience, whether it's mental health, substance use, co-occurring disorders, and traumatic experiences. So we help those individuals along on a recovery journey and getting back into health and wellness with living life skills, vocational training, and supporting with job development as peer certified peer counselors themselves with their lived experience.
Hi, I'm Valentino Matlock, and I'm a certified dementia practitioner, and I'm the head of marketing for Montclair Senior Living and Memory Care in Morton Grove. We actually are a new luxury brand of assisted living. We saw a need for affordability in the Illinois market. So we were, as investors, we were able to open up a new community, which will be open in May, that's catered to affordability. And one reason I am in health, in this panel is because I dealt with a really bad situation when COVID happened. My former owner of our company committed suicide at our office during COVID. So, there were signs there that I saw that I wasn't able, I didn't know it until now. And so if I've known those signs, I would have been able to help them.
Love it. So we're going to try to keep this actually to about like 20, 25 minutes so we can actually get some people off to whatever you want to do or even welcome some questions. But I figure we start with my background with mental health is I'm in remission from PTSD. Had a health experience, thought I had a heart attack out on a run. That was kind of diagnosed as you thought you had an event that you thought you were going to die, diagnosed with PTSD. So for me, it was really about like, how do we get access to care? How do we get people going through care? How do we get people supported on the back end for care? So as a panel, we decided we weren't going to talk about the stigma of men's mental health because we talked about that enough, but we want to talk about how do we improve access? How do we make sure that people that are actually in care get through care? And then long term, how do we support them so that they remain in remission or even the family members associated with it? So I figured, Cassandra, you've got some very unique perspectives on access, and that's not just saying like, hey, how do clinicians have more appointments, but you have this really cool perspective on kind of the dynamic of the people that are in the market right now.
Yeah, so I think that as a clinician by trade, again, like we're in a rehab center and I'm in the for-profit sector, but previous to that, I was with Department of Corrections, which is, 85% male when you look at the entirety of the population in DOC. And all of that, if you're meeting the substance use disorder diagnosis and the need for treatment, the court and the judicial system will literally force you to go. It will be a requirement of your parole or your probation or your release from incarceration. And there are so many studies that identify that forced treatment not only doesn't really help, but is very likely detrimental to success. People come in more resistant, they're coming in, with more stigma that someone's forcing me to do this. I don't want to do this. I'm not going to open up. It's harder for the clinician, which, the job is not easy to begin with. But when you look at that, of course, more men are less successful in my realm is substance use disorders, but in treatment in general, because they are more likely to be forced into treatment. And that is less likely to cause buy-in. And then men are not following through with that long-term care.
Mhm.
So I think we really need to look at like looking at the warning signs, which we've kind of talked about and we'll touch on again, how to get more men as practitioners in the mental health field. Because if people do not have role models that look like them, that act like them, that speak like them, they will not look at that as a potential field for themselves. And there's no role model for someone who is emotionally vulnerable and clear. And then we need to identify a way to get them to buy in and ask for the help. Because once we're forcing them, we're fighting an uphill battle.
Yeah. GB, you have a very unique business perspective on this.
Yes. So for me, I'll throw out some numbers, like just on a macro basis. If you see, the entire industry is very, very fragmented from a provider point of view. Many independent providers, around 45, which is almost half of the industry, do not take commercial insurance.
Mhm.
So what I see is there's a lot of talk about mental health, therapy. You have all these discussions and debates in the media. You have celebrities coming out talking about this, but when someone calls up a provider, he needs to wait 3 to 6 months to get an appointment. That the difference between reality and what we see in the media, there's something which is not right,
Mhm.
and that's where we are trying to work in.
Yep.
So as I said, we operate a business called Turnwell. We have 80 providers on it. Everyone, like 85 to 90% of us, our providers take commercial insurance, they take government insurance, and the other part is so one part is accessibility to the service, the other part is quality of service, which is basically if somebody goes to a talk therapy and they are referred to a psychiatrist.
Mhm.
Again, I'll throw a number before I come to my conclusion and assumption. 65% of non-metro areas in the United States do not have a psychiatrist. So once you are referred to a psychiatrist, if it takes 3 to 6 months and you have to go to another city, the drop-off rate is huge.
Mhm.
It's probably more than 20-30%. When it comes to men, it's more than 50%. And come to think of it, a referred patient is more vulnerable than anybody else.
Mhm.
So in Turnwell, we are trying to do, we have a full service, if not under the same roof, i- in the same MSA.
Yeah.
So we can treat the patients better. We can get them appointment as soon as possible. These are the things we are trying
Yeah.
to achieve. So yeah, I wouldn't say my main complaint, but the thing that I want to see change in the coming years is accessibility of the service
Love it.
itself.
Let's come back to that for like the support. Renita, your perspective on this in terms of populations that really need the help across the board was like your story was amazing to me when we talked the other day. Tell me a little bit more about access.
So my story is my dad. He was a veteran, a Vietnam veteran. So I grew up in a household with my dad with PTSD and paranoid schizophrenia. I believe he was diagnosed prior to him being drafted to Vietnam. He had some childhood traumas. So growing up, I was under. I was diagnosed with PTSD, and my dad was a drug addict. So coming from Vietnam, he had a drug problem, and so in our house, when he needed drugs or whatever, it was very disruptive in our household. So as a child, I thought I was causing a disruption. If I could just be a little bit quieter, he won't just outburst and things like that. But, it caused me some anxiety and things like that. But I was a daddy's girl, so I would go down with my dad to the VA where he had to navigate these systems. So from knee high as a child, I learned about going to the VA and what my dad was fighting for his service connection disability from the VA. And in that process, we grew up in low income housing. That was something that was offered to veterans. I'm from New Orleans. So that was something my dad accepted, but he still was fighting for his service connection for his family. So I saw my dad going through this process and how it impacted out him himself with his other physical health conditions as well as his mental health, but also our household. I have two other siblings that was impacted in the house when it was disrupted with my dad, and he had all these health appointments with the VA. They gave him like over 1,000 medications. It was just a lot that I saw him try to navigate, and he was persistent with that because he knew what was rightfully for him. So I got to see how to advocate and be persistent in advocacy. Um, as my dad, you know, went through that process, and I grew up under that, and my siblings as well. My dad finally got his 100% service connection. Unfortunately, he had passed away. He was hit by a drunk driver. So it's moving further. Fast forwarding, when he got hit by the drunk driver in 2000, my mom, 2 years later, no, a year later, my mom was diagnosed with MS. So that was trauma after trauma. Then Hurricane Katrina happened. So that was another trauma. So navigating all of that. And I myself had a nervous breakdown at age 19. And my mom and my dad was supportive of me. But my dad most so because he saw things in himself happening to his little girl. And he felt he couldn't protect me. So with that process, that was a lot for my dad to take. um but as I was coming through my recovery from my mental health breakdown, getting back on track with going back to school because I had goals and things I wanted to do, but when that disruption happened in my life, I felt like, okay, this is my lot in life. I'm going to live with my parents for the rest of my life. And my goals of becoming a social service worker and things like that just dissipated. um but moving forward, as I started navigating systems, learning from my dad how he navigated systems like Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Services, I got connected to that organization. It's a state funded and federal funded organization that support people with disabilities with supported employment. So they actually paid for my schooling where I got my degree in rehabilitation services and counseling.
Mm.
Um, then moving forward, once I graduated, my dad, like I said, he was killed by a drunk driver. Then my mom, she went into the hospital for 5 months, maybe a year after, came out using a wheelchair while I'm in my program of study. So it's paralleling to what I'm learning in school.
Yeah.
And so now I'm supporting my mom in real time what I'm learning. And so all of that process, then the hurricane, of course, was trauma after trauma, and I didn't recognize that I was in survivor's mode when I moved to Washington State
Yep.
and relocated. So it's been a journey and a process, and I found my voice in advocating for my mom as I was on my journey in recovery, and then taking the things I learned from my dad as he showed me how to be persistent in what I deserve from my tax dollars that's paying for these
Great.
systems. So that's kind of the perspective I'm coming
Yeah.
from, coming along someone in their journey to get back and re-engage with community.
I love that, Renita. And
Mhm.
Valentino, your story, like I love the way you talked about it. So I'm kind of gonna work our way. I'm gonna ask you like kind of two questions, and we'll kind of work our way back, which is you have this unique perspective of like come from the dementia side and the home care, but you had this like very, very personal thing. So a little bit of like access, but let's talk about how we support people because you brought up the idea of early warning signs and how do we see this stuff and show me you know me and all that sort of stuff. So if
Yeah.
you tie the two of those together and we'll kind of work our way back because
Yeah, so after he committed suicide, I thought about it and I was like, wait, there was all these signs way before this happened. So COVID was just the last straw. So all the warning signs of, financial, there was money issues and we didn't know it was as bad as it was
Mhm.
until he did it. And then it was COVID is what did it for him. It was like overnight, we had all this business. We were profitable after the first 6 months of opening. But it was like all that business overnight was just canceled. So nobody wanted our caregivers to go inside their homes because they were afraid, everybody was. So all those, visits got canceled. So we went from all this business to nothing. If I would have saw that, that was one thing, the isolation. Like he used to always reply right away, to emails and things. Well, he started taking longer and longer and where it was going to days and days and then finally was to where he wouldn't even respond at all.
Mm.
And, so it really, and I didn't know him well enough outside of work. I knew him, we went on sales calls and things all the time, but I didn't really know too much of it, but there was other things.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently he had a breakup 30 days before this,
Okay.
7 years, and we didn't know. But the signs were there, and I wish that I would have known ahead of time, hey, there's something going on because maybe I could have helped.
Yeah. Almost like this peer support network, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's at work,
Yeah.
A lot of times you don't know them, especially your bosses, you don't know them that
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
But, they're having things and it was right there in front of us.
Mhm.
And when we thought about it, we're like, okay, it was there a long time ago.
Exactly. And Renita, we talked the other day about how like some of the work that you're doing is actually helping kind of create these peer support networks where the people that you work with, you're actually training some of them to be able to be they're not a clinician necessarily, but being able to support people. So maybe 2 minutes on some of the work that you're doing there.
Yeah, so certified peer counseling. So my experience after the hurricane happened, when we relocated to Washington State, I became a case resource manager with Developmental Disabilities Administration, and I didn't realize I was in survivor's mode. Trauma informed approach was not talked about. I'm coming from a southern region to a northern region. I was not aware of passive aggressive behavior. So all of that was going over my head because again, I was in survivor's mode. I just thought, oh, I got a job. I can pick back up where I left off, and not realizing I'm managing my mom who's disabled now. I'm helping her to manage and get back her life. I'm trying to control my life,
Mhm.
but my job was a refuge for me because I got to give resources and support people, but the biasness that I was feeling in there, I felt like I was going to have another breakdown. So I reached into my toolkit, what I knew from what I had experienced early on, and reached out to a therapist. I took time off from work and I got some support I needed. And long story short, I had the disability resign from that job for my health. Again, peer support, my employers was not aware of a natural disaster just happened and it impacted me mentally, emotionally. I was not even aware until I reached out to my therapist and we started talking about things because I didn't know how to process what I was feeling and I felt like things unjust was happening to me. So that led me to take a step back a year and a half from when I resigned from that job, and my mom in the process transitioned. Um, and so I worked at a managed care organization, and it was like deja vu, just different faces. And so from that experience, I was let go from that job after 3 years being there. And when I was let go from that job, um, I was led to start working in my own neighborhood where they had people that I had blinders on working in a system that I didn't see that was right in my backyard. And so I started connecting to these individuals that had relocated to Washington 12 years ago. A older lady, she was maybe 70 years old at the time. She was helping a neighbor next door to her who had several small kids with disabilities. She had chronic health conditions and she was a Latina woman. And this neighbor was taking her to her job, no, taking her to doctor's appointments, her children to doctor's appointments, school, and advocating with her and for her. And she was not aware that she can get paid to do that as a caregiver.
Yep.
So I started telling her about those resources. Um, then I formed our nonprofit in October of 2019, that last quarter. By February of 2020, we got our IRS papers, and then the pandemic happened. When the pandemic happened, the lady I was mentoring, we both took the Washington State Certified Peer Counseling Training. It was free prerequisite online training. We took the trauma informed approach training. Um, and then that led me to tap into wait, they have a lot of people that I'm coming across that need some support with mental health and reintegrating back into community,
Mm-hmm.
getting back on track. And I remember when I was in that place when I had my nervous breakdown and I needed peers, and I came across some friends I went to high school with, and they saw me after we had graduated. Now this group of girls, we all had our visions and dreams what we would do after high school. But I had a bump in the road and they didn't. And they saw me in the local Walmart with my mom and they recognized me, but they told me, you don't look the same. My mom talked to them and told them what was happening with me. Immediately that next day, they took me out to lunch and we start reminiscing and talking about when we were in high school and what we wanted to do. And it snapped on me. It came back to my remembrance. I used to want to do that.
Hmm.
And having them as peers around me, not judging me, but having compassion and empathy towards me and wanting to support me to get back on track, that started me on my trajectory to um, connecting to DVR services, going back to school, and then full circle having the peer run organization where Washington State is now. They have the certified peer program with those with lived experiences,
Amazing.
and we have a recovery residence under our peer run organization. We do supportive housing and employment
Mhm.
where we're training those. That's our initiative. We're training individuals to take the certified peer training because 2026 is going to turn into a licensure program in Washington State for peers. So it'll be equivalent to a licensed mental health counselor where we can bill Medicaid or any other insurance. And so peer support is very vital and important for anybody in any healthcare industry to have someone with lived experience come alongside them and support them so they can find their voice and get back on track. So it's very, very vital
Love that.
for that workforce that's
Yeah.
being developed with peer support. And it's across the states. They're trying to standardize the credentialing process, but it's coming. And that's something a guy talked about earlier about human commodity. That is a growing workforce. So I do
Baby steps,
encourage,
right?
yeah.
Baby steps all the time. States making progress.
Mhm.
GB, you said something earlier. Was talking as we're talking about like supporting people through their care journey, and something that stuck out with me the other day that you said is it's kind of the referral channel between psychologist to psychiatrist, and we have this like massive drop off rate. What are you guys doing to think about that and fix that? Is it more practices? Is it less practices? More practitioners? And I know Cassandra, you're gonna have like great perspective on this too.
Um, More integrated practices.
Okay.
So we have everything under the same roof or within like a few mile radius. Uh, when we start in any new MSA, any new city, that's our whole focus, so that
Mm.
we can provide the full gamut of services to the patients. We can serve them in the best way possible.
Mm.
So that's the entire process of giving out quality service. Uh, Touching upon I'm so extremely unqualified to put my comments after Bhumika and Cassandra and all of you guys on the panel. But something we were discussing before, early on the table, I was talking to Dr. Burns there. We have been talking, and I've been listening to the panel discussions. We have been talking about identifying markers before you need care. Uh, and I just think mental health, healthcare in general is very reactive and not very proactive.
Mhm.
I think that is taken to extreme in mental health space.
Yep.
We are very, very purely reactive healthcare space right now.
Mhm.
The only proactive thing that's done is on my annual physicals, my physician would ask me 3 yes or no questions.
And even
That's
that's a
it.
little bit reactive anyways, right?
Yeah, and those are extreme questions. Most or 90% of the times I would say no to them. And why not just have one 15-minute session every year, if not every 6 months, with a therapist
Yeah.
who can talk to you, who knows your family history, and can detect those symptoms and something else. So again, current process, we are trying our best to bridge those gaps. Uh, but we need to be more proactive, and
Agreed.
we just need more ideas from the
Agreed.
provider community. So
Agreed. Cassandra.
Yes.
So we've talked about getting forced into treatment. If you get forced into treatment, how do you keep people in it? But even people that aren't forced into it, like as a clinician, how do you think about making sure that people kind of stick with it?
Well, so I want to piggyback off of a couple of things that I just heard. So, GB, you were talking about integrated care, and Valentino, you were talking about warning signs and things like that. And when we're talking about men in mental health, the warning signs are different than a female in mental health. A female can come to you and say, "I'm feeling emotional, I'm feeling heightened, I'm feeling anxious, I'm upset, I'm isolating X, Y, and Z," right? Because we are conditioned from the time we were born to engage in our emotions and be the hysterical gender, right? So we're okay with that. But for men, the warning signs are really what Valentino was talking about, which is that isolation, but we're not saying we're feeling isolated, we're just stepping back.
Mhm.
Or specifically in physical health manifestation.
Mhm.
And so integrating the care, when I go to my primary care physician, if I'm a male client, and I say, my stomach is really upset, or my head hurts all the time, or X, Y, and Z, this is what we're looking at with primary care physicians not saying, "Oh, hey, cool, let me give you an antibiotic right away." Or let's see what our situational stressors are. Let me connect you to a therapist that hopefully I have in house, or at least I'm connected to in a certain way, so that we can determine if this is mental health or physical health,
Mhm.
because they're too connected for us not to be connected as a mental health provider.
Mhm.
And then, additionally to that, one of the things that I'm working really hard with Paramount Wellness, but in general in the field, is to encourage and support male practitioners in the mental health field. So, if you look at the studies, 19% of mental health practitioners are male. That is a disparaging number in comparison. And so we talk about this a lot with females that if they have sexual trauma or trauma in general at the hands of a man, they're unlikely to share with a male therapist, right? That's a really common narrative. But what about the men who are uncomfortable sharing with a female because of the stigmas of being a man?
Mhm.
And I'm conditioned from the time I was born to be manly and I'm not going to feel my feelings. I'm just going to be angry and punch this wall. And then I have to go in and talk to a female
Mhm.
and let this guard down of this manly machismo.
Mhm.
And so one of the things I'm working on, I do have a full-time male clinician that we run gender specific group, and most men are either asked prior to, do you feel more comfortable with a male or female? Or we place them with the male in case. Because we
Like proactively with a male.
correct, because we would do the same thing for females.
Hmm.
That if I have a slot with my female therapist and a female is coming up from detox into rehabilitation, why wouldn't I place them together?
Sure.
Right? So being trauma informed on both sides of this spectrum is really important. And then just looking at, culturally and generationally, is this field even supported for men? From the time I know that when I was a kid, like being a therapist was a thing. It
Yeah.
was a potential thing for me. And I'm not sure that that's true with the male gender.
I never thought about it.
Weird.
Didn't even cross my mind. Although my psychologist happens to be female, and it's interesting you say that because even I think about like some of my like physical things, like physical therapist or
Hmm.
doctors. Like I always said, male doctor, male physical therapist.
Yep.
Over my entire care team, including my endurance coach, female.
I mean, I got to be honest with you. I don't know that the option to have the mail was there,
I don't think it was,
right?
yeah, to be
Because
honest.
otherwise, hopefully, they would
Actually,
proactively share it.
actually, to your point, it's literally, it's just coming to my head right now. It's when I was younger, my parents wanted me to see somebody. It was a male
Mhm.
guidance counselor at at
Yep.
school. But it got forced on me.
Yep.
I said, I'm not gonna do
And
it.
that's true very often of mental health and substance use. They revert, if a client is struggling with that, you're going to revert to the time that that started.
Yeah,
And so you're talking about adolescence, but how is that very much different than a 25-year-old who's been forced into treatment the entire time and
yeah,
never actually addressed their issues?
wild.
Wild.
It's wild. It's kind of like everything we've talked about right now is one of my, and Craig, I'm going to call on you for a second. You don't have to say anything, but one of my clients is Craig Mason, it's a startup, but he has formulated Raise High, which is how do we get into, all the modalities of communication, Slack, text, email, even if people are on the phone and listen and connect the dots for preemptively identifying suicide ideation.
Hmm.
Because to your point, you know, when you say something, not everybody, Valentino, to your point, nobody catches those warning signs. So how can we use technology to not just throw AI at the problem, but actually assist practitioners and folks in higher education or in schools to actually catch these warning signs where I know we're talking about men's mental health right now, but it is very much omnipresent across the industry of like, how do we actually support these people that, I tell Craig as we go through our strategy sessions, it's even if you're a clinician, you're a person, and there's going to be in that 55 minutes, your mind's going to probably wander a little bit because we're human. So how do we make sure that we connect those dots, make sure that we don't miss anything?
Yeah, and I think that's a really important piece of using AI, which I didn't necessarily anticipate coming into this panel, but
I didn't either.
it's, I just had this discussion with somebody else that AI in the behavioral health scope, which is my scope, is a really promising endeavor, but it's also a little cold. So we need
Yeah,
to work on that because my whole
yeah,
scope is being warm.
totally.
And then the only other thing that I wanted to piggyback off of in the last panel, for those of you who are here, I believe his name was Brian, but he's been talking about recovering out loud.
Mm,
And that is the other piece of supporting and encouraging and empowering men
yep.
to come into the field and say, I either want to help others, I want to support others, or I need help and support.
Hmm.
Is because others that have been, in their lifestyle or look like them, act like them, speak like them,
Mm,
are recovering out loud, whether it's from substance use or mental health.
I love that. Go ahead, Renia.
Yeah, I want to jump in. The Black community, with mental health and stigma. That's something that our community have not kind of used the system, mental health system. We've relied on the church or our neighborhood community, because we don't see people that look like us that could relate to our
Mm,
experiences. So one of the things that we are reaching out to is to the BIPOC community, doing our
mm,
peer outreach and initiatives to the Black, Indigenous people of color, to see more people that look like the community
amazing.
that's being served and that need to integrate with the peer services,
Yeah,
because we also we're doing healing circles as well, because it's generational trauma
yeah.
and people have held a lot of stuff in, because in the reality in the Black community we feel like we live in two Americas.
Hmm.
So we have to kind of assimilate, and so we can't fully function as our full self.
Yeah,
So coming into a space where you see people that look like you and you can release a lot of stuff that maybe started in childhood but it's generational,
hmm,
and now you have to navigate this larger system that may be biased to you. So creating that space where individuals can come into and just
yeah,
breathe
So
and release and heal before we can get into, let's get some vocational training, let's get you connected to peer services, but we also kind of redirect them to mental health services and things like that. So we kind of a supplement to the mental health service and the clinicians with the peer support that we're offering.
and I think supporting that, and I'm sorry to jump in here, but
good.
um, I kind of love, we're kind of in the same sector and
Mhm.
supporting human beings.
Yes.
But in speaking about that, you have the Black community that really does experience this, and then you have the Black men, which is also like a double, you know,
Hmm.
minority in that realm. But one of the things that you're talking about, and one of the things that I really strive to do, and I think is the field we need to, is to honor someone's
Mhm.
experience.
Yes.
And so when I have a male client who comes into my office, and I'm never going to jump in and be like, hey, cry, tell me all of your things. Do you know what I mean?
Man, that might feel forced.
Weird, right? God, Anthony, cry.
Jeez.
But the thing is that it's about honoring and saying, as a clinician, as a therapist, I understand,
Mhm.
or I hope to understand. Please help me understand
Yes.
that your experience as a male is different. And this probably walking into this room was very, very difficult.
Mhm.
And I support and honor that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then that allows us as practitioners in whatever, realm of this field we're in
Mhm.
to encourage the next generation of that, that gender
it.
to come through.
I love it. I know we're coming up on time, so we'll just wrap up with each of us. We'll give 2 sentences on what are you most excited about or proud about or looking forward to in the next 2 to 3 years on men's mental health and the progression that we're going to make or are making. Valentina.
I would say affordability,
Yeah.
because healthcare, especially since COVID, has went really skyrocket in
Mhm.
all sectors
Mhm.
in healthcare, from senior living to adults
Yep.
that are not seniors. Like, it's everywhere,
Mhm.
and it's really destroyed the healthcare market in general.
Yeah.
So I would like to see more access to mental health,
Sure.
because there's a lot of times they have them, but they don't want to admit it that they have mental health issues.
Mhm.
A lot of times they don't. So as a dementia practitioner, I see a lot of times you get those symptoms mixed up with mental health, and
Yep.
then mental health to mixed up with dementia,
Mhm.
because those behaviors, they're kind
Mhm.
of, they're similar psych behaviors that
Yeah.
happen. And a lot of times they are not getting the proper health care that they need, because they think that they may have dementia, but it's not dementia.
Yeah.
It's really they need mental health,
Mhm.
help, and they haven't had it.
I love that. Renita, 2 sentences on what you're most excited about for mental health and men's mental health in the next couple of years.
I'm most excited about the developing peer workforce and seeing more people of color get into becoming peers, where in general, people with lived experience where they're recognizing and they're getting knowledge about they have opportunity to use that lived experience to earn a living.
Mhm.
As a certified peer counselor, as a licensed peer counselor, as this workforce is developing, and our organization, Caring with Compassion Community, is kind of at the forefront in Washington State. They have a lot of things that Washington State is affording in the behavioral health realm for providers, for profit, nonprofit, with recovery housing, with peer run organizations, just a lot of things that I believe Washington State is on the cutting edge of. And we're looking at Caring with Compassion Community to go global with what we're doing with peer support. And I believe that in every industry in the healthcare field, a peer need to be in that community,
Love it.
support individuals on their journey to health and wellness and recovery.
I love it. GB, what are you pumped about?
Um, as a society, I would say like we go through 4 steps in healthcare. First is talking about it. Second is people realizing it's okay to ask help. Third is getting that help, accessibility, and the fourth is quality of service.
Mhm.
Get all the help that you need. I think we have already started talking about it,
Mhm.
be it media, celebrities. Uh, I think men's health is in that first phase. We have done that. We have started talking about it. We need to continue doing it. I think I'm excited that we are entering that second place where, as men, we think that it's okay to talk to people, talk about our feelings, talk getting a therapy session, and I'm I hope that our third and fourth phase are much shorter than the first 2 ones that we
Agreed. Agreed.
Agreed.
Sandra.
Yeah, I think I'm most excited about something we've already touched on a little bit, but really the integrated approach of medical and mental health, behavioral health.
Yeah.
So as Paramount, we've partnered with Poplar Wellness, which is a live feed of 24/7 vitals in our detox. And so we have medical monitoring 24/7 of our clients who are there for behavioral health. And I think in doing that and in the approach that we're taking, we cannot ignore that men's heart rates going up and blood pressure being higher and they're having psychosomatic symptoms.
Mhm.
You can keep treating it with all of those medications and it's just not going to work
Yep.
because psychosomatic symptoms don't stop unless the anxiety or the depression or X, Y, and Z is processed. So I'm very excited about being part of the approach that integrates those two models.
I love that. And I'll just kind of wrap it up as, if I look at who's here, even the conversation that we're having, even like the complexity of who's on stage right now, this to me is a major step forward.
Great.
A couple of years ago, the pandemic accelerated some of these conversations, but we're now having this in a very dynamic way with people of all ages, races, complexities, perspectives, locations. And I think we are actually, GB, to your point, I think we are shrinking
Mhm.
the later stages of that. And that to me is exciting right in the moment. The next couple of years, who knows, right? But I do think we're well on our way with actual treatment, digital modalities, all that sort of stuff. And I think just the fact that we're having this conversation today and Health 2.0 decided having a specific panel on men's mental health is a very big step forward. So I'll wrap it up there. Thanks everybody for hanging out until 5:15 at the end of a conference day, but this is
Thank you.
amazing.
Thank you.
Question?